One of the seminal environmental events that led to the passage of the Clean Air Act in this country happened to steelworkers, happened 35 miles from here in the suburb of Donora, Pennsylvania. This is a picture of the Donora smelter in U.S. Steel's operation down in the Mon Valley, where in October of 1948, temperature inversion caused the zinc fumes and fluoride gases from this operation to collect in the Mon Valley. 20 people were killed, over 6,000 were made very sick. In subsequent recovery, over 50 more people died. It was one of the worst environmental disasters of this kind that the country had seen. And it was directly as an outflow of the outrage over this kind of incident, and frankly, similar incidents around the world, that industrial democracy after industrial democracy decided that these kinds of pollutions needed to be regulated for the benefit of workers and for the benefit of their communities. And so 15 years later, we passed in this country the Clean Air Act. It was something our union was deeply and intimately involved in. It was in the interest of our members. It was our members who were suffering as a result of these kinds of calamities, and it was our communities. The environmental movement was from day one in this country our movement. But today I think we are living in a changed world, and in a world in which those issues have been brought together in a new and more potent relationship. Some people would say that global trade and global warming have nothing to do with each other except that they share the word global. What the steelworkers and the Sierra Club have come to the conclusion that two very disparate sounding issues like this, on the one hand, the economic trade engine that's driving our world today, and on the other hand, the primary environmental issue facing the Earth's people, an issue that we identified as the steelworkers as the most important environmental issue 16 years ago, that those two issues are intimately related, and we won't solve one to our satisfaction without solving the other. So let me just remind you, I think you all know as steelworkers some of the terrible things that we've been living through the last decade or so in terms of U.S. trade policy, the clearest reflection of the global economy as we know it. 2.7 million manufacturing jobs lost in this country over the last 5 years, almost entirely as a result of global trade and the equalization of labor costs that's going on around the world today. Later this year, China will become the largest holder of U.S. debt, displacing Japan. We will owe China at the end of this year in excess of $1 trillion. Really a symptom of what's gone wrong with the global economy and what's gone wrong with our approach to taking it to heal. And as you all know, the U.S. trade deficit is at a historic high. Nobody talks about lowering it anymore. They just talk about lowering the rate of increase. I want to spend a little more time talking about global warming, though, because some of us aren't as familiar with some of the facts and issues relating to global warming. And in fact, a lot of us, I suspect, would feel the way I did when I first started reading about this issue. I came from Minnesota, grew up routinely walking to school when temperature was 30 degrees below zero, and back in those days, if you would have told a 7-year-old kid the world's going to get warmer, you're not going to have to live like this, I would have said, God bless you, let's make it happen faster if we can. Global warming, though, is not an issue about comfort. A lot of us in the United States don't understand that there's an international consensus around global warming happening. And the reason for that is that we've had a phony debate going on in this country over the last 5 years, funded, frankly, by a lot of scientists on the payroll of the energy industries who are interested in trying to create public confusion around this. But frankly, the scientific debate over this is over. The polar ice caps are already melting, and you can see from the slide up there the degree to which the North Pole polar ice cap has diminished over the last 25 years. That may seem like an inconsequential issue, but what happens when this vast amount of fresh water runs into the world's ocean is that the inhabited coastal areas where some 2 billion people live in the world today are going to flood. And those certainly include some areas in the United States. Not a pleasant thought to think about the coastal areas of Florida being underwater, perhaps New York City, certainly some of the major cities in California. But when you think about the magnitude of 2 billion people around the world being displaced because human civilization, a great deal of it has taken place on the coast because of food supplies, the cost of dealing with that is astronomical. And this gets to me what is really the point of all this and the point to the Steelworkers Union. It's not about my discomfort as a kid growing up in Minnesota and not being all that keen on cold winters. What is the point is that the resulting economic disruption will overwhelm the world's capacity to react. Now, I read in the paper this morning that Katrina, Rita, and the one other hurricane that hit the coast areas last year currently have a price tag of $122 billion. That's one hurricane season in one coastal area of one country in 1 year. And think about dealing with that on a regular basis. And it gets back to why we care about this. I ask the questions, who will pay if we don't deal with global warming as responsible stewards of the planet? And who should pay? Now, I put the picture from Katrina. The water is rising, please, of people waiting to be rescued. Don't know if these particular people were rescued. We know that 12,000 steelworkers and steelworker retirees were affected by Katrina last year, either losing their jobs, losing their homes, in some cases losing their lives. But it is very clear, I think, to any of you who look at what happened in the wake of Katrina, that it's working people like us who will be asked to pay unless we take power into our hands and demand that this situation be handled differently. And when has it ever been the case that the rich and powerful will deal with the problems of the poor and working and powerless in any way but to their own advantage unless we organize and we demand that things be done in a more egalitarian, more majoritarian, and fairer way? We need to start today to do something about that. We can't wait till tomorrow. We can't leave it to our children. The reason is because decisions are being made. We're a big country. We're a strong economy. We need more power. Currently, 120 more coal-fired power plants are on the drawing board to provide that power. That will lock us into a 30-year trajectory to do nothing about global warming. So the decisions we make today are the decisions that are going to make the changes real. Now, I don't want to paint this as a bad news picture that we have to do something about or we'll suffer the consequences. The fact is, I'm enormously hopeful that we are being given an opportunity to rewrite the rules for the American economy and the global economy as a result of this crisis. And that, I think, is the message that I want you to remember, that this is a hopeful time, not a desperate time. It's an opportunity for us to grab hold of the global economy and change it for the betterment of working people in this country, stabilize it, and make it an economy that supports and lifts up standards of living all over the world. But if we continue down the path of letting the major economic decisions for our economy be made by the fossil fuel industries, we will lock ourselves into a world in which the rich and poor will suffer and benefit in ways that we haven't seen in over 100 years.